Thank you all for being here today. It has been almost 10 years I've been doing this. And we've done some remarkable stuff. I hadn't done the math prior to about yesterday when I started looking at the number of men that I've actually sat down with at a real critical time in their life where they had to disclose, where the risk of not disclosing was bigger than that of disclosing. And I did the math, and there would be about like 2,000 guys I've heard. You know, you think of how many times in your life where you've had, maybe everyone in this room has had 3, 5 moments where they really needed somebody, probably better somebody outside the family, to talk about this stuff. And I've had the honor of maybe 2,000 men tell their stories to me. So that blew me away when I did that number. I must know a lot by now. A lot of people coming in and touching our work, and 12 counselors and 2 life coaches, 100 men a week coming through for our support right now on a counseling basis, 15 to 20 new guys every week coming in and getting that loving support. You know, I realized that, you know, maybe I should have actually talked about what we're doing at the end, because I'm going to be talking about all the problems. But what we're doing is addressing a lot of those. And yeah, that gives me a lot of pleasure to feel like we're doing a lot for what we are. We started initially with men's sheds. Does anybody know what a men's shed is? There's a model, Australian model. It's more for the older blokes, but a lot of good stuff gets done in the community. In the last 6 years, with us working with other parties, there's been 28 men's sheds formed in Canterbury. 28 groups of guys that were willing to meet on a weekly basis to get this thing going because they really wanted it to happen. I mean, I would never have believed that, and it's still growing. You know, they all get the idea, they all know what it is, and they just make it happen. It's in their church hall, their community hall, it's a shed out back of the you know, they get in the old garage or whatever. It's really powerful stories, some of these guys, and they just had their conference last week. I got into the Blokes book on the MSD after the earthquake, gave us some money to do some work on developing this resource for Canterbury men, to just advise them of what options are out there in the community. We've done 6 print runs of this so far, about 120,000 of these, plus 3,000 Chinese ones as well. A lot of different people came in and helped me put it together, and have paid a little bit towards it, and you know, all the different print funding that came in. This has been a highly successful project. There must be 100 different people that come through the men's center and picked up 180 of these books for their church, for their community group, for their sports club, and they just keep going out the door. Every print run is gone about 2 months later. I have to hide about 8 boxes for my own use, and they're just gone. So, you know, we're fantasizing about a national edition of this. It may not have the same impact, but it's been beautiful. Counseling for men I mentioned earlier, we're already at well, it's more than 100 guys a week, I think it might be, isn't it now? It'd be more like 110, and we're still growing. All men, that's almost the biggest counseling service in the area. 110 men, that goes against the narrative. If we keep this going for another 10 years, just think of all those men that got care, and they're telling other men. They're going off and they're telling other guys, and those guys are coming to us because their mate told them. I didn't believe it. Like 5 years ago, if you told me that we'd be as successful with this counseling, it just kept growing and growing and growing. The counselors came forward, the men came in. So it's been a beautiful development. It pays for 40% of our budget right now. Getting into the last resource, we just recently released Fun for Older Men, and it does talk about men's sheds. It talks about all kinds of different masculine things. But once again, this is as useful for the social workers, health workers, like the Blokes book. It tells them where they can send the guy so he can get back involved in the community. And this is a Google map as well, so they can use their cell phone when they're out at some man's home and say, hey, did you know that there's a men's meeting every week around here? I saw this talk online, the gender empathy gap. I mean, that's an attempt to explain why we've treated men's care differently from that of women's. I mean, I'm not exactly attached to, I'll explore this at the end, but I will just go into some of the differences in care and responses for men inside of education and inside of the social sector. I won't mention health today. Somebody mentioned earlier the Otago longitudinal study. That's beautiful research, really granular, following about, I think it's 3,000 men and women from birth to, I think they're 35 years old now. So all kinds of great data there. It said boys ain't dumber than girls. Their IQs are about the same. They're not, you know, they just don't fit into the school system as well. They're more fidgety, more likely to be punished. And that doesn't explain why boys are failing in school. It's like school is failing the boys. It's not because we lack the raw material. And there are some controversial, not so controversial studies now that I've seen it repeatedly, that there is a marking down of boys. When you swap boys and girls' names on papers, they mark boys harder. It usually is the women teachers, predominantly the teachers are women that are doing the teaching as well. The male teachers don't mark it down as much. So you got to wonder about that. Why that actually, if I'm right about this, if this is true, why isn't that carried forward? Why isn't there a pushback in the school? Why isn't there a sensitization of the teachers happening? Because it isn't. This results in the tertiary sector. Somebody mentioned earlier it's 6-4 split right now. You look at the girls up front here. Maybe that's not fair. I put them in, they were in front, but there's actually supposed to be 6 of them up there versus the 4 guys. So this doesn't accurately represent our universities now. And it's been about 30 years since the 50-50 number at the university level was happening. We've been like this for about 15, 20 years as far as I know, and it's slowly drifting slightly higher. Our response is 45 scholarships for women only. If you go, seen that? On the breakout side. A lot of these are legacies. This is for nursing, Bachelor of Arts. This isn't for the STEM stuff where the women have been disadvantaged. These are all kinds of funny little scholarships got set up. Locally, and it's now called ARA, it used to be CPIT. They've got a next step for the women. It's like a purpose-built building, almost as big as community hubs here, I think. And that's for helping women who didn't actually do well in high school get into university or post-secondary education. I think it's a beautiful idea, but it's for women only. And boys are the ones struggling. They didn't fit the school system. And they're the ones that I would argue actually need that extra help, on average. I think everybody should get it. Now, another current response they have it over at ARA is if you want to become a tradie and you're a woman, you get it for free. If you're a guy who's 25 and under, you can get it for free as well. That's wonderful. But if you're a woman, you get it for free. And this is our way to take care of women, to make sure there's more of them in apprenticeship programs. We're prioritizing women's care, women getting into it. I mean, it sounds great, but my history is as an engineer. And I actually wanted always to be a social worker. I really wish I'd been nudged and supported at that time in my life to become a social worker, instead of spending the first 15 years of my life being an engineer, which I did not give a toss about. In America, they say there are as many men raped in prison as there are people raped inside the rest of the population. My guess is that's the same thing that's happening in New Zealand. Maybe not as hard, but it's still up there. This is not something we're talking about. The Minister of Corrections has told a number of guys I know it doesn't happen. Now, we did talk, a lot of you have addressed the domestic violence stats. This is the It's Not Okay website, of course. And we talked about family deaths. From 4 years to 2012, an average of 13 women and 10 men were killed in family violence. That's on the It's Not Okay website. 13 women and 10 men. And those 10 men deserved care. And the way our system is structured right now, it's unusual for them to be offered care when they come to police attention. The guys are expected to sort it out. Maybe the guys walk away, they're not warmed up to accept care, but those guys should have had care. This one, you're not going to get all this data, but this is from the Stats New Zealand page. And you can go on a monthly basis and look at the police victims. And if you extract all the ones under 17 and you look at male versus female, if you look at, this is the police, they're walking in and ticking the box for victimization. It's an intimate partner, it is 1 to 3 male to female. 1 in 3 of those victims. Those guys, the majority of those guys still are not getting care. They're streamed off into nothing. And they sometimes end up in the men's center, and I hear their story and I go, what? That's all, you got nothing. You know, it's appalling when I hear about the lack of care for these guys. And if you were sitting in front of them like I have, you would say they deserve care. And I didn't mention, when it comes to family, broader family violence, it was 1 in 3. 34%, I think we'll make this 32%, of those people that were tagged by the police. That doesn't include all the guys that are dismissed as not being a victim, or 2 guys just having a fight, or 2 gay guys having it out. You know, those aren't family violence victims often. They just don't make the stats. They don't get their tick. Our response on the It's Not Okay campaign page is meant to be gender neutral, and they do have a few pictures of women talking about don't be bad to your family. This is about, you know, when I look at men As a search, I got this, a resource for men to stop being so violent. Safety plans for women. I have no idea, and I'm a social worker, what I'm supposed to tell a guy to take care of himself and how to make him safe for himself. I could use a booklet like that. We haven't even cared to do it for guys, never mind to make it gender neutral. This is how we respond at a local level to care for victims of domestic violence. These are all focused services. I noticed later on that Battered Women's Trust isn't up there. This is for Timaru. This is for Mali women. West Christchurch, Aviva, doing some work with men, of course, as well. Shakti for Asian women. How many workers are involved in the care for these female victims? 50, 70? Somebody told me it was 70 once. That was before the earthquakes. 70 people working full-time, plus volunteers, plus all this shouting into the media about this care and this need. And I would say not a single one focused on the care of men. This is just in Canterbury. Keeping it brief, I'll mention suicidality, obviously 3-to-1 ratio. If you include motor vehicle accidents and some speculation about that, that would be getting into 4-to-1. A huge number of guys that are dying needlessly. Good guys too, most of them. I don't know how you not be a good person to deserve suicide. Imprisonment, that's been nodded to already. I bet about half of the guys that are in prison don't need to be in prison right now. Let's put it this way. Giving them some soft services, we'd get it down to 50% damn quickly. And those guys sitting in a concrete box, I feel angry when I know about it, when I hear some of their stories. We've let it happen. It's been foolish. Homelessness in men obviously is an issue. Not to the city mission, they do it for women as well too. The media representation of men, when it's done the research overseas, it's a consistent pattern of abuse against men. A denigration of men, a shaming of men, a ridiculing of men. I love The Simpsons. I grew up with Jackie Gleason. I do like the big buffoon of a guy. I get it. I love teasing men. But I don't think there's the honoring as well. And soft services, I mean, that's where I'm talking about the response for men. The huge gaping hole. The Men's Center, we've been going for 10 years, and we've really scaled it up over the last 4 or 5 years. So guys are actually getting support now. The Women's Center's been going 30, 40 years, something like that, and good on them. There's a string of them up and down the country, 11 or 12 of them, something like that. They've been doing great work for 30 years. When I think we've been doing this 5 years of work for men, seeing that they get cared for at that critical time. And we talk about men not asking for help, and yet there's this huge legacy of great work done for women. I think of the Women's Health Information Centers, where they were actually cared for, proactively, somebody reaching out for their special health needs. And I understand the rationale behind that. When I look at Plunkets, which really focused on the well-being of women and children, and they, all those extra doorways. When I think of my wife, where she's had these opportunities to be reached into by services and to be screened for help. Another issue inside the health services, we talk about guys not going out and seeking help. I saw a trend, it was done on the local Pegasus GP practices, and what happens with gender? Boys go down at the age of 15 to about 0 times per year where they see somebody until they're 35 or 40, because they generally do not need any help. But those women on average were 2 or 3 times. Something like that, they needed help. They were engaged with a health professional on a regular basis. Some of them obviously not, but some of them it's 5 times. Some were getting it for birth control, some were getting it because of the kids. But they were getting in there and engaged with people. So there's reasons why men aren't getting help, and the reasons they're not connected to health and social services. So those are those doorways to care I'm talking about. The large number, when I look at the guys coming in, I would say when I see about 80% of these guys, I look at them and I think, many of these guys, maybe a good quarter of them are in tears. I'm usually responding with tears. There, I would say to myself, where would you get into otherwise? Who would support you otherwise? And I find that I don't actually generally have that question, so I get tearful afterwards about the fact that we're doing this. And I wish it was happening up and down the country for men. Getting into theories of why. Is it that we care less about men? I asked, I think it was Dennis volunteered the other day, we thought the men would take care of themselves while we developed all these other services. Somebody said to me, it's biology, dummy. You know, because men and women are just different, and we take care of the women and children first. There's another one you call, the men are so entitled with the other stuff that they really don't deserve as much care. I mean, maybe call that a feminist narrative. I hate to label feminists as just that. We just didn't develop the advocates and get off our butts. It's kind of like the guys that said, well, if you want a business as a woman, make your own damn business. It's not recognizing some of the structural barriers to men creating resource services like we've done with the Men's Center in Canterbury. I've got this other theory. We just didn't get around to it yet. Now you better follow me with the camera. I'm going way over here. I'm going back into the history of the world. Now, 500,000 years ago, we were a lot airier than me right now. And, you know, if you tried to put 500 of us into an airplane, let's say 500 baboons that didn't know each other, we would have ripped each other to pieces. We came from there. But 500 years ago or so, we started getting into a democratic type society. We started getting into a more compassionate society. And there's been a huge evolution over that. The rights of men and women, obviously. The rights for people to speak up and to be breaking out of systems. The plagues might have had a lot of good stuff to say about this too. Then stepping into about the Enlightenment 300 years ago, where all of a sudden there was a common call for humanity, and power was no longer right, might was no longer right. And we step into all these other evolutions, the number of states that started forming, the rule of law, getting into the rights of men and the suffrage for men, then soon after the suffrage for women, universal suffrage for all of us to be able to vote, and to have democratic families, democratic schools, to lose the death penalty, to have gay rights, to have trans rights. We were moving really quickly through all this stuff. I think we're finally getting down to caring for men as well. And I think this is part of a larger thread of history that we're going through right now. And we can get credit for it. You know, I get the Men's Center going. But I think I couldn't have started this work 30 years ago. And I wouldn't have been supported the same way at all. And I think it's a matter of its time. So, that's reaching our time. This little guy, this is the best way to spend the last 2 minutes. You know that story, that little homily about the boy, the starfish on the beach? The little boy's just picking up the starfish on the beach. I'm picking up the starfish, throwing them out, you know, when they're dying there on the beach in the sunlight. And some guy sees him and he walks over and says, hey, what are you doing? Oh, I'm saving starfish. And the old guy says, well, yeah, that's not going to work. There's like 10,000 of them. And he says, well, it worked for that one. And I think we've got that one in our hands right now. You guys are all here today for that purpose. Taking care of men. Thanks. And these are all the people that gave me money to do it too.